Ladies and gents, welcome to the Vicinity and Beyond podcast with me, Henry Jinman.
And me, Julie Grail.
And today we are revisiting one of Julie's favourite topics, ABIDs, accommodation bids. And we want to do this for a few reasons. First of all, because we've got some comments we want to respond to. Secondly, there have been some updates since our last recording. Who knew the bid world moved this quickly? But Liverpool gone to ballot since then. And we want to try and end with some practical advice for ABIDs, because I think last time we ended up speaking a lot about tourist tax, which is related. It's in a sort of similar field. But what is some practical advice for those placemakers considering going for or creating accommodation bids? And ultimately, I want to ask a different question this time, which we will come back to at the end, which is, will ABIDs be victims of their own success? That'll be one for the discussion to come. So.
And hasn't it been great to, in all of these podcasts, we've been saying, tell us what you think. Let's create a conversation. Let's create a discussion. I think you and I have had quite a lot of comments from people privately on every podcast we've done, and it's created really good conversations. This one, we've had some, and we had quite a lot publicly on the site as well. So just really good that people are listening and it's creating dialogue. So yeah, good stuff.
And helping people and providing value. So I'm glad. Yeah. So let's jump into some of the comments. And first, I want to go to the TikTok comments. I bet people didn't necessarily know we're on TikTok. We're now over 6,000 views in the last 30 days.
That's worrying, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're going to be recognised in the street.
No, definitely. Definitely not. But, maybe we can bring a place management to a wider audience a bit. But a couple of points that got picked up there. So some clever people pointed out that Airbnb accommodations are classified as businesses liable for business rates if they are available to let for more than 150 nights a year. And I think this was in the context of, we were talking about this in relation to tourist tax, weren't we? And whether Airbnbs were liable for tourist tax.
Yeah.
And this would be a challenge were there to be a tourist tax in the UK.
Yeah, 140 nights, by the way. You said 150.
150.
But it's 140.
I can't even read what's in front of me. 140 nights. Yes. And someone else pointed out that in many parts of the world, Airbnb is collecting tourist tax.
Yeah.
So where the law has come into place,
Airbnb
have put in the provisions that they needed to do so.
Yeah, and I think Airbnb as a company have had to adjust in various different jurisdictions because this has become a big deal and it's a big proportion of the sector of the market. And our issue at the moment here was where they're not a business rate payer, they can't be charged a bid levy. And where we don't have a tax, we're only reliant on the bid levy, eligible rate payer link. So going forwards, yes, if we have tourist tax in this country, the likelihood is there'll be a route into ensuring they are payers.
And then on LinkedIn, so Nick Brooks-Sykes, Marketing Manchester and Director of Manchester ABID, he said, we had totally misunderstood the bid model. And I was a bit worried when I read that. I thought, have we? And I went back through all my notes and Manchester ABID's materials, and I think fundamentally we've understood it, right?
Yeah,
fundamentally, as we defined accommodation bids in the last episode, where we said it's using a bid legislation for a group of accommodation providers that are charging an amount to those businesses based on the occupancy rate as opposed to based on the business rates, and then passing that on through a per night charge.
Yeah.
I think that's all.
I believe all that's correct.
All that's correct. So, Nick, please do tell us where we've gone wrong. Vaughan Allen, also a board member for the ABID and chief exec of Cityco and Manchester BID, gave us a little bit more detail. He said, the room charge to the customer is not voluntary. It's part of the Ts&Cs the customer signs up to when booking a room, so forms part of the contract. And this is quite key because there are a number of lines of thought which we went down, which said, well, if the person, when it comes to pay their bill, can say no, or a group booking, like an airline booking, that is a problem for the model.
Yeah.
And so Vaughan, quite rightly there, I think, is saying, well, actually, no, we can make this.
Which is great. Yeah. And actually, if that does then square that circle, well, then that's positive, isn't it? Because our nervousness was, is it variable or not? Is it voluntary or not? And actually, if Vaughan's saying no, when they're in the Ts&Cs, it becomes a legal contract, then great. It does raise the question, how many have them in the Ts&Cs?
Right. And so so I sort of went back to Vaughan with a question, and he came back and said, so far it's the case that it's covered or a small surplus is generated. So that was me asking him around whether the hotels were benefiting from this charge. And he said the charge to the hotel is deliberately set below the average occupancy, so there's always a buffer. Yeah. So this is interesting, right? So if you had this model and you did it on the average occupancy, and so you had a hotel which had 10 rooms, let's say, on any given night, and the average occupancy across the city was half, then, and you were charging at that amount, you'd have to pay £5, assuming it's £1 per night, to the bid. Whereas if it's lower than, you could be saying charging £4 going back to the bid, but charging £5 to your guests, and so you end up with a surplus, which would be a benefit to the hotel in implementing the model.
And arguably is then a buffer if not every tourist staying in the hotel has paid the charge.
Okay.
If the Ts&Cs weren't clear and they could argue that they could not pay it. Yes. Now, we don't know that bit because we're not seeing firsthand whether that bit's happening or not.
Yeah. So this is then the question. How many hotels, how many of the accommodation providers are then in fact adding it to their Ts&Cs? Because I presume there wouldn't be a legal mechanism to do so, or by running a bid ballot.
The bid bit is the sort of misnomer. No, the bid doesn't. By having it in the through the bid ballot, it doesn't mandate a customer to pay it because it's not a tourist tax, it's a tourist charge. So the bit that mandates them, that Vaughan's saying quite rightly, is the Ts&Cs individually through the hotel mandates a customer to pay it because it becomes a contract between customer and hotel provider. And then the argument is from a customer arriving in Manchester, have they seen it in the Ts&Cs? Is it there? And did they see it? Was it provided to them to ensure that when they get to the desk and they're being asked to pay the £2, they then going to willingly pay it?
Yeah. And so I have reached out to both the comment, haven't heard back. And so I did a little digging of my own. So I used a piece of agentic AI.
You're the king of AI, aren't
you? No. Definitely not, but I do use it a lot. For those that don't know, agentic AI it's AI that goes further than just giving you answer response. It's a piece of AI which can go off and do a task for you. And so I gave it the list of 74 hotels listed in Manchester, and I said, go off and look at the terms and conditions of those hotels and look for a city visitor charge or similar named charge in those. And of that, 26 of them came back and have included the charge and the rest had not. And that number's a bit not misleading, but you could easily change it because you've got sort of 7 Premier Inns on the it's not included side, but they all have the same set of terms and conditions. Okay. So if it was included in that one set, suddenly that number would jump seven higher. Because what lots of them do is they've got national or even European terms and conditions. They're not breaking it down to that level. So just to check, I did manually go and look through a few to make sure that my AI had done a good job. And from the few that I spot checked, it seemed to be correct. And so then my question was, okay, so it's not obvious during the booking process. It's not in the Ts&Cs. What happens if I'm there? Because one of them was Leonardo's, and I stayed at Leonardo's in Manchester not that long ago.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure I saw it on my bill.
Okay.
And so I rang them up. And I rang up Premier Inn and I said, I'm interested in booking. What's this city charge? And both of them said, yeah, you've got to pay it. That's the thing here. You've got to pay it. So, I mean, tick in the box.
Right. They know about it. Yeah.
And they're enforcing it. They weren't clear on why when I dug a bit deeper. One said it's because it's the law. And,
Right.
And another one said it goes to Manchester City Council.
Oh, okay.
But I think we can allow them credit for that because we know how hard it is to get frontline staff for that message to communicate through.
Well, the fact is they knew. They at least knew it existed. And
And even if it's not in the Ts&Cs, I think it's going to be tremendously hard to avoid paying it. Because if you're stood there, having stayed there for a couple of nights, and the person says, yeah, here it is, it's on your bill, and who's going to know whether it's in the Ts&Cs or not? Or so.
Well, I think that perhaps the example that we used last time about a regular airline crew visiting, you or I stood at a desk being told it's the law, you've got to pay it. We're going to pay it, aren't we?
Yeah.
But would a regular group booking to a hotel who's had their finance or compliance team look into it in more detail, would they come at it from a different place because it's a higher cost over a regular period? And if it's demonstrated it's in Ts&Cs and they can see that will kind of square that circle and satisfy them. If it isn't, what it might do, I guess, is inspire the hotel to backfill it into the Ts&Cs. So from that point on, they've tidied up the process.
Yeah. But if you are that group, booking for that group, and you do want to stay in Manchester City Centre, everywhere's got it because of the virtue of it being done through a bid legislation. So your choice is either to be there or not be there and to stay outside, I guess. If you're that adamant on avoiding it. So, I mean, an interesting bit of exploration there, but what does that teach us? What does that mean in practice? I think it means even it's not voluntary where it's in the Ts&Cs. Even where it's not in the Ts&Cs, it's still quite hard, I imagine. There'll be a very few occasions, if any, where people are going to say
and it'd be interesting to know, as you said, so going back to Nick's comment, we've totally misunderstood. I don't think we have, but if we have, tell us how we've misunderstood. And I guess the other piece of it would be really interesting to see what is their success rate on levy collection in terms of the hotel paying the bid based on their occupancy invoices, and then the front end of it, are the hotels collecting 100% of that tourist charge, or have they got either a proportion of or group bookings challenging them? It'd be quite interesting to know. I don't know if that stuff's been published, but I certainly haven't seen it.
Because I think this is quite an exciting model. I think the potential of this model is, if as long as people aren't put off going by an additional charge on top of the already high VAT, which we talked about last time, which I don't think they will, then by having it lower than the average occupancy rate, the hotels are going to end up with a surplus. The place managers end up with a pot of money to invest in the place and try and get people there. In theory, all these bits work, and they are pioneering this model, and it just feels like the hotels are the key, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
What are the hotels think? Why are those hotels not adding it to their Ts&Cs? Why are hotels being so averse to this in other places? When the potential is they could end up with a surplus. And a pot of money going to a group of people who can do great things for a city.
And that's a good segue to Liverpool, isn't it? So Liverpool have run their alteration ballot to move from the traditional bid levy model of based on rateable value in the same way as they bill their businesses in the other two bids they've got. They won their alteration ballot across into transferring to this model. The results were reasonably positive. 83 providers, 83 votes, 44 turnout, so 53%, 26 yes, 18 no. But it's just gone to challenge. None of us know the detail of that challenge yet, but clearly someone, presumably hotel providers within Liverpool, have challenged that model, and it's up to now and I know I've done it a few times, it's a painful process, but a necessary sort of accountability process within the regulations for now the government department to review both sides, review the appellant and review the bid provider and ballot provider to see whether everything was all in line with the regulations. Because it's not actually, the challenge process isn't to question whether it was the right thing to do or not. It's to question whether there are any material irregularities in the ballot process. So
in the democratic process.
In the democratic process, not whether it was a good idea or not. So that's now out there. And it suggests, although it only suggests, and we can't say any more at this stage because we don't know, it suggests a hotel or a number of hotels are questioning this process. Presumably because of the question in the model, but maybe it's because they just question the process. We don't know.
Because it's interesting, because at Liverpool, having had a ABID of a different form, which I guess in the previous episode we would define as a traditional bid, but just for a specific group of businesses, in their report talking about generating 47 million in economic impact for the city. Like, this is a successful organisation that's tweaking their model to a different funding mechanism in order, I presume, to try and do more.
Which to increase the budget. Because they were locked into the rateable values and a multiplier based on what turned out to be lower values as the rating list changed. So they just didn't have the scope to bring in enough. They could have gone through an alteration in the traditional model whereby they increased the multiplier and stuck with the plan they had, but they chose to switch it across into the Manchester model to be able to increase in the take, but also do it through the occupancy-led approach with the tourist charge rather than the hotels bear the direct cost of it. And that's the kind of interesting thing, because I think it's a little bit market forces either way. They could have just adjusted the multiplier in the existing model higher off the rateable value. That was a higher bill for the hotel, and the hotel could have still charged more on the front end of it to bring in enough income to pay for it, because that's all the tourist charge is. It's just charging more. The difference is presentationally, the hotel isn't looking like it's them that's increasing its hotel rate. It's doing it on behalf of a wider, crusade, cause, whatever.
I see your point.
It's right. It's like they're £100. Let's say they're £100 hotel overnight hotel rate. They could have increased it to 102. But instead, they're increasing it 100 plus 2 to bring the same amount of money in.
And I suppose by changing the method, you are creating that narrative which says we're all doing this together, we're all upping our prices, so there's no one's advantaged or disadvantaged over the other. Hence, hence going for the reballot, going for the alteration.
And it's sort of deflecting the principle of some of this additional charge is on you, customer, because we want to reinvest in this place for you, customer. And that's sort of the argument of, we got into it a bit last time, the argument of the tourist tax, that where a tourist comes to a place and increases the burden on the place in terms of cleansing, safety, security, transport infrastructure and everything else, morally, it feels right to charge a tax on the tourist to pick up some of the cost of that burden. The nervousness from so many of, I'll say us, but I think the sector is, it's not abundantly clear whether a tourist tax then reinvests that money back into tourism impacts. It invests potentially, and I think what we quoted last time of Edinburgh, at least through the Scottish model, it looks like it's going to reinvest 10% back into what we'd say is truly visitor and tourism management stuff, and 90% is likely to go back into local authority services which are not related to the burden that the tourist has created. So that's the tricky link, I think, that's coming, and why some are nervous of a tourist tax. And I think we said last time, no one in this operating in this field, no place manager, bid manager, local authority, can deny the fact that we haven't got enough money in the system to improve these places for us to run them well, whether that be for a tourist or for locals. haven't got enough money to do it well enough. So there is not enough money in the system. We need to find a way, whether it's through a tourist charge, whether it's just through a pure bid levy mechanism where the hotel charges more, or whether it's through a tourist tax. We need more money in the system.
So maybe this leads us nicely on to getting to some practical advice for those considering this. That might be the reason, I think it is, why some are, to say, how can we do more? How can we supplement our revenue to invest back in the place? But if you go down this route of an accommodation bid, you've got to realise you are creating an entity for a group of businesses that are going to expect that that's what...
It's their money.
It's their money.
Yeah, ring-fence back to them.
Ring-fence back to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder whether, and I don't know, so this is just merely conjecture, I wonder whether in Cambridge's example that we referenced last time where they failed at their ballot, and Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, it was very, very close, but went to challenge. Was it that actually some hotels believed in the model, but some hotels vehemently didn't believe in the model or didn't know enough about the model to then vote and support it? And so is it actually a wider exercise that all hotels, all hotel groups, because obviously there's a lot of hotel groups across the country, not much of this is independent voice. Do they all need to be at the table to have that understanding of, are we all in it together? Do we all need to contribute to this fund? Is there sufficient need in this place? It's the same argument, really, that we do for bids wherever we go. We mustn't have a democratic deficit in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So the businesses of a place need to believe there's a need and need to believe that we can satisfy that need through a levy that is money by business governed for business. And perhaps that's where it's fallen down. There isn't a wide enough consultation yet for the hotel sector as a whole to believe this is the right model, whether it be through this tourist charge route or indeed through tourist tax, because this is going to be the next thing. Where Scotland are there, Wales are coming, England are coming imminently. It's only a matter of time. Very recently, a letter's gone from the various regional mayors into government saying through the devolution bill, let's have a tourism tax right. And I think it will come. I mean, I can't quite predict, none of us can quite predict when it will come, but I think it will come. So I think it's only a matter of time. This conversation is going to happen. And the sort of danger of the tourism tax per se coming rather than this route is how much of that money will be ring-fenced back to the benefit of the hoteliers and the tourist on the street.
So this brings me to my question of the day is, will ABIDs be a victim of their own success? Because, like you say, it feels like there's a strong opposition within the hotel sector to adding an additional charge on top of everything else that they are paying. But what Manchester and potentially Liverpool, and if a few more get through, which it wouldn't surprise me if they did, it's going to give us the opportunity to see. It's going to produce real life evidence and results. But do they get back in again? Do the hotels vote for them a second time? Do numbers fall when they add this charge? I suspect they won't. And if I was to be so bold as to make a prediction, and we like the rest is politics as a podcast, don't we?
We do.
And they make predictions all the time, which are never correct. So this will probably be
so
the
be
case
careful.
here.
Yeah.
But I'll do it anyway. My prediction would be that the authorities at B will look to these examples. We'll look to Scotland, we'll look to Wales, we'll look to Manchester and the ABID. And if they see success, they will use that as evidence for their argument for instituting a wider tourist tax for the mayors. And then what happens? If you're asking that hotel, if Andy Burnham's coming along and saying, well, I want, a couple of pounds, and the ABID's there saying, hey, hotels, let's ring fence some money for us here. How would they feel about two charges as opposed to one?
So do you get £100 room rate plus £2 to Manchester ABID and another £2 to Andy Burnham's team? And do customers start questioning the layering of charges? Some places you go, particularly America, Europe as well, particularly America, it's not unusual to be in a position, hotels and other things, service actually, where there are these incremental taxes. Happens a lot in the Middle East as well, because there aren't so many corporate taxes. You do get those incremental taxes. You do get a bill of, here's the base, here's that. And do you question it? You kind of think, but you don't really question it. Would we question it here? We don't know yet, do we?
No.
Instinctively, if it's 100 plus 2 plus 2, is it de minimis enough to not be questioned? It possibly is.
So there we go. We open it up to your thoughts. Will the tourist tax be the end of ABIDs?
And there is this sort of wider point, as we say, about cost. We all know we need more money in the system to manage places better. And we also all know that inherently human nature is we don't want to be charged extra because we think it's someone else's problem. And it's ultimately, if there's not enough money in the system, somebody does ultimately have to pay. And this will be, as you say, a good example of seeing, is this sufficiently price elastic to allow that charge without it impacting demand? We don't know yet.
No. But I like it when people test things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So carry on, guys. Be pioneering. I think for those entrepreneurial placemakers out there that are thinking about this and do want to give this a go, even if it is short-lived, what would you be saying to them around how do you set up? How do you engage these hotels? That's got to be the critical thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. It's if you're whatever your sector is, in this case it's hotels, what do they all think? Not what do some of them think, what do they all think? And if they all want it, who is anyone to say don't do it? It's my argument about bids more broadly is if you genuinely, and I know some bids, and certainly some of my clients at times will absolutely groan at me when they ask me the question, what percentage of businesses should we consult ahead of ballot? And my answer is 100%. And they groan. I'm like, well, how can you not talk to all of them? They're all going to be charged, so how can you not talk to all of them? So if they all like it and they all want to do it and they all see the value, who's anyone to say don't do it?
And because especially when we're talking about such small numbers.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, these are tiny numbers. Yeah.
Manchester, then if you look at a smaller town or city, you could be talking about what, 20 or 30?
Well, I think in Cambridge's one, wasn't it something like 37 in total?
Okay.
It's a small number.
And so,
so you should intimately know them all, shouldn't you? Really,
a couple of them vote one way or the other. It could sway it quite a lot.
Yeah. Well, in Bournemouth's, in Christchurch and Poole one, the example was 16 and 15, wasn't it? It was that tight. It was one vote out. In Liverpool's case, I think the numbers are, it's 8 votes, so 26 yes, 18 no. So it's only 8 votes difference in numbers, not in value.
So how can we as an industry prepare for the argument, which would come in my predicted world of, and I think your predicted world of a tourist tax coming, to say, hold on, that money shouldn't be going, or not all of it should be going into the black hole of public finances. That needs to be solved somewhere else. I know we've got bigger tax problems. How do we organise ourselves in order to make that case? Yeah,
and I think it's two sides of it. So how do we demonstrate to those that might look to impose a tourist tax that a really valuable delivery body is the bid? So we might not be arguing don't do a tax. What we might be saying is we are well placed as a bid to deliver the projects and services you want to see as a result of that tax take. And actually, certainly that's been happening in central London and certainly across Westminster. A lot of the conversations we've been having with Westminster City Council is we as bids, bringing in currently 25 million levy across the 19 bid arrangements in Westminster, are really well placed to deliver for you if you had a tourist tax. They get that, they see that. And the balance almost is, again, it comes back to this kind of economic argument that can only be proved when in place. How sensitive is the price? How elastic is the price? And if it goes too far, do we throw the baby out with the bathwater? And we only know that when we do it. So being really clear about the positioning of a bid versus an additional tax versus the delivery body of that money, don't lose the bid in pursuit of something bigger or different, because that won't be a good outcome. Arguably, and I think so every bid manager listening will absolutely know this, and it's more apparent in some places than others, but so much of what bids do on the ground, whilst they might not have a lot of money, they're doing so much the day-to-day management of place that keeps it clean, safe, and the basic services right, so that the tourist can even come and enjoy it. You wipe away the bid, you might have created a great regional tourism agency, but no one wants to come anymore because it's filthy.
Yeah.
So, that balance is really critical. And nobody, I think, can predict quite where that balance is, but it's there. It's absolutely there, and we need to just be really alert to that.
And we often find that when we're delivering apps in places, that the bids are the best delivery partner for that, because they've got the relationships with the businesses in that place. So maybe perhaps that is how ABIDs survive a tourist tax, is actually they become a delivery partner for the tourist tax funds. And because they keep that accountability, because it's such a transparent, innovative structure, the bid structure, but their funding's just coming from a slightly different place. Do you think you could maintain those two things? If the funding's coming in a sort of roundabout way back in, can you maintain the accountable nature? Because
I mean, you should be able to, shouldn't you? Because you should be able to justify for the monies that are filtering down from, lots of bids over the years, not so much now because the money doesn't exist so much, but lots of bids over the years have spent a lot more than just their bid levy. They've had other funds, whether it's been grant funds, commercial income they found from people. They've delivered projects and services against other funding alongside their bid levy. So yes, they've proved already they're a bona fide organisation that can deliver and can prove value back. And in some cases, they've had to be very accountable for that extra strand of money that's delivered something separate to what the bid levy's been doing. So that's achievable. I mean, I think always the question, and this is going off on a kind of wider tangent in a way, but when bids talk to me and have done over the years about we've been offered this, either we've been offered this money or we've been asked to deliver this project, and should we do it? The starting point is, how proportional is it to what you already do as a bid with the bid levy? If it's bigger than the bid and bigger than the bid levy, is it going to swamp you so much that you're going to fail to deliver on your core business, which is delivering to your businesses that have voted for you? And you do have to be really careful about that. The same thing about if you've been given a grant with so many conditions and targets and everything, is it going to take you so far away from day-to-day delivery that is not on balance the right thing to do? Equally, if your constituents are ultimately in a core town centre, but this model is regional, are you going to end up being pulled away from what your kind of commercial constituency is? And some bids have experienced that, where they've expanded boundaries and they've gone beyond kind of core area. You've got to deliver equally to everyone. You can't be in one place in terms of income, but be in a wider place in terms of delivery, unless everyone believes that's the right thing to do. So there is a balance to strike here. And ultimately, it's the ballot box each 5 years that proves whether businesses are still happy with your delivery. And in some cases, some of the income streams, they've added value to what they've been doing. And the levy payers have just, for every £1 they've paid, they've got £3 worth. Brilliant. That's great. If that's what you can make happen. A good example of the very early days, actually, which was quite tricky, was as Localism Act came through and neighbourhood forums were being developed that were predominantly originally resident-based. Now, neighbourhood forums can be business and resident, so they're not only just about residents. But in the early days, particularly in central London, they're about residents only. And it was taking the bid staff so much time to understand the minutiae of what these neighbourhood forums meant, because none of them were skilled to do that kind of work, because they hadn't been employed to do that kind of work. So you've got to be careful about how far the tail wags the dog. How far away from core purpose do you get? Same thing is around planning. A number of bids around the country have experienced this. There's been a big planning issue in a place, and the bid staff are not experts in planning, and in some cases, they've been brilliant at recognising they're not experts and they should have a voice, but it's not their voice. And they've used some of the levy money to commission an independent planning advisor to speak on behalf of business and to make representation. But it's that balance of you're not a jack of all trades. You have to recognise where your limits are in terms of your own skill set. And the key thing they are, from a bid perspective, is they're conveners and coordinators of a business voice and a business need. And sometimes you then have to commission an expert to deliver for you. So getting that balance right can't be prescriptive, but is critical.
Okay. So, in conclusion, if you were in that position right now of running a bid in a place, or perhaps are looking at an opportunity for a place that wants an ABID, what would you be thinking, or how would you be approaching it?
Yeah. I mean, I have to sort of confess my own position is I still feel quite uncomfortable about them because I'm not quite sure that everyone is pro. But that's because I haven't directly been in an environment where I've run a consultation across the entire hotel sector. What I do know is some of the hotel sector have directly lobbied me that they don't like them. So I'm quite prejudiced still, probably because I've got in one ear some of the sector telling me they don't like them. They're not comfortable with them. But
then isn't that the first?
So the first thing is
there are other. That's not the only option if you want to do an ABID. Actually, you had where Liverpool started from.
Yeah. Well, and bear in mind, in the last podcast we said, what's really, really important distinction here is the reason Manchester went down this model and picked up a model that dealt with hotels only is because they only had a retail bid before, so they didn't have any levy on hotels. Every other big city already levies its hotels, and perhaps not all of them, and perhaps not to the level that they want to create a big enough fund to do things. But, Liverpool already had a number of the hotels levied through their 2 existing bids. What this did was captured a wider audience, has a bigger geographical boundary, and picked up the hotels from the 2 existing bids and said, right, we're actually going to charge you at a higher rate, all you hotels together across the city, and we're going to just charge you once. But we're going to do it through this mechanism. And then what it's done is adjusted. There are no further examples like Manchester where a city has a bid but doesn't, that's a bid as opposed to an accommodation bid, but doesn't charge hotels yet.
Yep.
So we're in a kind of unusual place. No one's going to directly follow Manchester because no city is in that position. It's whether they've got an existing bid. And a few have approached me to talk about it. They've got an existing bid and they like the idea of an A bid and how do they do it? And my kind of question back has been, well, how many hotels do you already have paying your bid levy? And are there any hotels on the periphery beyond your existing boundary that causes you to think about a boundary change? So is it just a boundary change to your existing bid? So you pick them up? Or is it actually that you want them to pay more? And is that just then an alteration ballot to raise the multiplier? Because remember, I talked about it this time and last time. It is perfectly doable to go to a bid area to talk to the businesses and say, if there is something specific, I did it years ago in Reading, late night operators to avoid the imposition of a late night levy, said, let us pay more. We wrote a business plan that said every business in the area is going to pay 1%, but the late night operators offered up, we'll pay 3% and ring fence those funds into late night activity. We did that. We built rules that said if a late night levy came in during the term of that bid, they'd revert back to 1% and the ring fence money would go because it would be in late night levy instead. Everyone was happy with that. So the principle of picking up a sector and treating them differently because they want to be investing more, that's fine. That's been there a long time. My issue is, are the sector asking it for themselves? Do they all agree with it? And what is it you want to do with it? And does it make sense to set up something separately, or should you just design it in to what you already have?
And this is what bid managers and placemakers are good at.
Yeah.
Is thinking about their unique place.
Absolutely.
And so just because you've seen something nice and shiny over there, how
How does it
how
apply
does it
to your
apply
place?
to your place? And
Yeah.
actually, there are nuances and other solutions that
Yeah.
may be on offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.